The stars had always seemed beautiful to Admiral. He had spent 30 years sailing between them, learning their patterns, understanding their secrets. But tonight, as he stood on the observation deck of the carrier Resolute, he could not see beauty anywhere. He could only see Earth burning below him. They had come without warning. Their ships were made of crystal, beautiful and terrible at the same time. They caught the sunlight and scattered it into rainbows even as they rained death upon the cities below. Had watched Chicago disappear in the first 10 minutes. Then Mumbai. Then Lagos. Millions of people, gone in the time it took to drink a cup of coffee. Lieutenant Amy Brooks walked up behind him. She was young, only 26 years old. Her family lived in Mumbai. Did not know how to tell her that Mumbai no longer existed. "Sir," she said, and her voice was shaking, "we have a message from the Galactic Concord Council." Turned away from the viewport. He did not want to look at Earth anymore. Every second brought new fires, new destruction, new death. "Put it through," he said. The holographic image of High Arbiter appeared in front of him. Was a creature, with hard shells covering its body and large compound eyes that saw in every direction at once. Its mandibles clicked together as it spoke, a sound that had learned to recognize as nervousness. Admiral said, "The Concord Council has reviewed humanity's request for help under the Mutual Defense Agreement." Felt something cold settle in his chest. He knew what was coming. He had known from the moment the ships appeared in Earth's orbit and no conquered fleet came to stop them. "The request has been continued. The claim this action falls under their religious exemption rights. According to Amendment 12 of the Concord Charter, member species may not interfere with religiously mandated practices. The harvest doctrine is a protected belief system, and therefore the Council cannot authorize military intervention on humanity's behalf." Stared at the alien diplomat for a long moment. Behind him, through the viewport, another city was dying. He could see the flash of light even without looking. "Let me understand this," said slowly. "They are killing millions of our people. They are taking them from their homes, putting them in cages, and you do not know what they plan to do with them. And your answer is that this is allowed because it is part of their religion." Clicked its mandibles again. The Council understands that this is difficult for humanity to accept. However, the Concord Charter is very clear on this matter. Religious practices of member species are protected from outside interference. They have been practicing the harvest for thousands of years. It would be inappropriate for the Council to suddenly declare their beliefs invalid simply because humanity finds them objectionable. Reached out and ended the transmission. His image disappeared, leaving only the dim light of the observation deck and the distant glow of fires on the planet below. Amy was staring at him with wide eyes. "Sir, you just ended a call with the High Arbiter of the Galactic Concord." "I did," agreed. He walked to the tactical display, where the positions of every human ship in the solar system glowed like small dots of light. There were not many of them. The Concord had limited how many ships humanity could build. They had said it was for safety reasons, to prevent arms races and maintain peace. Understood now that it had been for a different reason entirely. "Get me a secure communication channel to every ship commander in the fleet," he said. "Then contact Secretary General Cole on Earth. Tell her the Navy is ready for whatever orders she wants to give." Amy hesitated. "What orders will those be, sir?" Looked at her. She was so young. All of them were so young. Humanity had only been part of the galactic community for 40 years. They had been excited to join, eager to learn, happy to follow the rules that older and wiser species had established. They had believed that the rules would protect them. "The orders to stop asking for permission," said. On the surface of Earth, in what had once been the great city of Ayers, Sergeant Danny moved through the rubble with his squad. The streets were broken and covered with dust. Buildings that had stood for hundreds of years were now piles of broken stone and twisted metal. The air smelled like smoke and something else, something sharp and chemical that made Danny's eyes water. Corporal Lisa Martinez raised her hand, signaling the squad to stop. "Movement ahead," she whispered. Danny looked through the scope of his rifle. Ahead of them, rising from the destruction like a strange flower, was a collection point. It was made of the same crystal as their ships, and it glowed with soft light even though the sun had set hours ago. Around it, drones were herding people toward the entrance. Men, women, children, elderly. They walked in a long line, their faces empty with shock and fear. "We should attack," said Private First Class Tom Bailey. He was the youngest member of the squad, barely 19 years old. His hands were tight on his weapon. "We cannot," Danny said. "Too many civilians. If we start shooting, they will use them as shields or worse." "Then what do we do?" Lisa asked. "Just watch." Danny watched the line of people shuffle toward the alien structure. Somewhere in that city, his grandmother was waiting for him. His cousins, too. Everyone he had grown up with, everyone he loved. They were all somewhere in this broken place, and he did not know if any of them were still alive. "We follow them," he said finally. "We watch. We learn everything we can about how they operate. And when the time comes, when we have a chance to strike without killing our own people, we take it." He looked at each member of his squad in turn. "And we make them pay for every single person they have taken." They moved through the shadows, getting closer to the collection point. They did not seem to expect resistance. Why would they? They had been doing this for thousands of years, taking people from planets across the galaxy. No one had ever stopped them. No one had ever tried. Danny thought about all the years humanity had spent trying to fit into the galactic community. All the treaties they had signed, all the rules they had followed, all the technology they had shared. They had believed that being part of something larger would protect them. They had believed that the other species would help them if they were ever in trouble. They had been wrong. As he watched another group of humans disappear into the alien structure, Danny made a promise to himself. Whatever it took, however long it required, he would make sure that they learned a lesson that the galaxy would never forget. Humanity was not going to disappear quietly into the night. Humanity was going to fight back. And when they did, the entire galaxy would learn why that was something to fear. Secretary General Cole had spent 20 years as a teacher before she entered politics. She had explained history to students who did not want to listen. She had taught them about wars and peace, about empires that rose and fell, about the moments when everything changed. Now, standing in an emergency bunker beneath the Swiss Alps, she was about to create one of those moments herself. The bunker was filled with the leaders of what remained of human civilization. President Young of the American Federation sat at the long table, his face gray with exhaustion. Chancellor of the European Union was beside him, her hands clasped tightly together. Premier Wei Jun of the Asian Coalition stared at the holographic displays that showed the destruction happening above them. Prime Minister Samuel of the African Alliance had tears in his eyes that he did not try to hide. "The Galactic Concord has refused to help us," said. Her voice was steady, though inside she felt like she was made of broken glass. "Every request we have made has been, every treaty we signed, every promise they made to us means nothing. We are alone." "We cannot fight them," Chancellor said. "The fleet has 300 ships in orbit. Our Navy has perhaps 40 vessels that can still fly. The mathematics are impossible." Nodded slowly. "You are correct, Chancellor. If we fight with what we have, we will lose, but we do not have to fight with only what we have." She activated a new holographic display. It showed the far side of the moon, and on that surface, hidden from Earth and from any observers in space, was something that should not have existed. A massive complex of buildings and structures stretched across dozens of kilometers. Ships floated in enormous construction bays. Weapons platforms were lined up in neat rows, waiting to be deployed. "What is this?" President Young asked, leaning forward. Luna Base said, "Our insurance policy." Admiral spoke from his position at the tactical station. He had arrived at the bunker 2 hours ago, leaving his ship in the hands of his second in command. When humanity first made contact with alien species, our governments made a decision. They would follow the rules that the conquered set for us. They would limit our fleet sizes and share our technology and open our markets. But they would also prepare for the day when those rules failed to protect us. He gestured at the display. Luna Base has been operating in secret for 35 years. Every ship you see was built there, using technology we developed ourselves. Technology that the conquered specifically banned us from researching. Premier Wei stood up slowly, his eyes fixed on the display. How many ships? 212 combat vessels, said. All of them faster and more powerful than anything the conquered has ever seen. To think they are fighting primitives. They have no idea what is coming. The room was silent for a long moment. Could see the calculations happening behind the eyes of every leader. They were weighing the risks, thinking about what it would mean to use these weapons, understanding that there would be no going back once they began. If we do this, Chancellor said slowly, we become enemies of the entire galaxy. Every species in the conquered will turn against us. We will be outcasts, hunted, and alone. We are already alone, replied. The only difference is whether we are alone and dead or alone and alive. She looked around the table, meeting each pair of eyes in turn. I am not asking you to choose something easy. I am asking you to choose survival. President Young was the first to speak. The American Federation stands with Earth. We authorize the deployment of Luna Base forces. One by one, the other leaders added their voices. Premier Wei, Prime Minister, Chancellor, after a long pause that seemed to stretch for hours, when it was done, felt something shift in the room. Something that had been broken was now being rebuilt, forged in the fire of desperation and anger. Admiral, she said, you have your orders, prepare the fleet. Far above the Earth, in the cold darkness of space, Commander Wright guided a stolen shuttle toward the enemy flagship. The shuttle was small and simple, designed for carrying cargo rather than combat. It had been captured during the first hours of the invasion, when a crew had landed to collect survivors from a destroyed city and found themselves facing human soldiers instead. Had lost everything in the first attack. Her husband had been working in Chicago that day. Her 2 daughters had been at school in the suburbs. She had been in orbit, commanding a patrol vessel, watching helplessly as the city disappeared in fire. Now she had nothing left but the mission and the cold purpose that kept her moving forward. Docking in 30 seconds, she told her team through the communication system. They do not think we can survive in their atmosphere. They will not be expecting visitors. Sergeant Danny checked his breathing apparatus. It had been modified to filter the strange gases that the breathed, gases that would kill a human in minutes without protection. And if they are expecting us, then we adapt, said. We overcome, we complete the mission, or we die trying. She paused, then added more softly, there is nothing left for us if we fail. Everything we love is down there, waiting to be saved or lost forever. The shuttle slipped into the docking bay without triggering any alarms. Led her team through the corridors of the alien ship, moving carefully past crystalline walls that pulsed with strange light. The ship was beautiful in a terrible way, like a sculpture made by artists who did not understand human concepts of comfort or warmth. They found a guard at the first intersection. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, its body made of the same crystal as the walls around it. Its eyes were like cut diamonds, reflecting light in 1,000 directions at once. It was looking away from them, watching a display that showed the harvest operations continuing on Earth below. Moved without hesitation. Her knife found the weak point in its crystalline armor, a joint where the plates came together. The creature fell without making a sound, its light fading as whatever passed for life in its body disappeared. Move, she whispered. We have 30 minutes to find their command center and plant the transmitter. Fleet intelligence needs this information before the offensive begins. They continued deeper into the ship, past sleeping quarters and storage rooms and chambers whose purpose could not guess. They had been traveling between stars when humanity was still learning to make fire. Their technology was beyond anything humans had ever created, but they had one weakness that understood very well. They had forgotten what it meant to be afraid. As she planted the transmitter in the shadow of the command center, watching the alien officers coordinate the destruction of her, made herself a promise. They would remember fear. They would learn it from humanity, from the species they had dismissed as primitive and weak. And when the lesson was complete, every other species in the galaxy would learn it too. The storm was gathering, and when it broke, nothing would ever be the same. The counterattack began at exactly midnight Greenwich Mean Time. 212 human warships emerged from behind the moon, their engines burning bright against the darkness of space. They moved in perfect formation, each captain knowing exactly what was expected of them, each crew member understanding that they might not survive the next few hours. Admiral watched from the bridge of the Resolute as his fleet spread out around him. The ships were beautiful in their own way, sleek and deadly, built for one purpose and one purpose only. They carried weapons that the Galactic Concord had forbidden humanity from developing. They used engines that broke the laws the aliens had imposed. They were everything that humanity had been told they could not be. "All ships report ready, Admiral," said Lieutenant Amy Brooks from her station. Her voice was different now, harder than it had been a week ago. She had stopped crying for her family in Mumbai. She had started preparing to avenge them instead. "Signal the fleet," said. "Execute the attack." They had grown careless during their 3 days of harvest. Their ships floated in loose formations, their crews rotating through rest periods. They had done this 1,000 times before, taking what they wanted from primitive worlds without any fear of resistance. They never expected the primitives to fight back. The first wave of human torpedoes tore through their defensive line before they could react. Ships that had survived for centuries dissolved into clouds of broken crystal. The rainbow light of their destruction filled the space around Earth like a deadly aurora. "Enemy fleet is scrambling," reported the tactical officer. "They are trying to form a defensive formation around their flagships." "Do not let them," ordered. "All cruiser groups focus your fire on their formation points. Break them apart. Keep them running." Space filled with the light of weapons fire. The human ships were faster than they had expected, more maneuverable, more aggressive. They dove into the enemy formation and began tearing it apart from the inside. The carrier Victory destroyed a cruiser with concentrated fire. The destroyer Swift eliminated 3 enemy frigates with a single spread of torpedoes. But they were not helpless. They had technology that humans could not match, experience that came from thousands of years of space travel. Their ships began to adapt, moving in coordinated patterns, their weapons finding their targets with increasing accuracy. "Resolute, you have incoming fire." The impact threw from his chair. Alarms screamed throughout the bridge as damage reports flooded the communication channels. Lights flickered. Smoke poured from broken consoles. "Hull breach on Deck 7. Engineering reports damage to the primary reactor." Pulled himself up, gripping the command console for support. Through the viewport, he could see the flagship turning toward them. It was massive, larger than anything humanity had ever built. Its crystal hull was glowing with charged weapons, preparing to finish what it had started. Then another ship appeared between the Resolute and the enemy. The destroyer Henry, commanded by Captain Maria Santos, had thrown itself into the path of the attack. Watched as the weapons struck the smaller vessel, tearing through its hull, breaking it apart. 300 crew members died in the time it took to draw a breath. "Sir," Amy whispered, her voice cracking, "the Henry." "I know," straightened himself and looked at the display. The battle was still raging all around them. Ships on both sides were dying every minute, but the humans were winning. Slowly, painfully, they were winning. "Get us back in the fight. We owe them a victory." On the surface of Earth in the ruins of Ayers, Sergeant Danny led what remained of his squad toward the collection point. They had been watching it for 3 days, learning its patterns, understanding how it operated. Now, with the enemy fleet in chaos above them, they finally had a chance to strike. "Charges are set," reported Corporal Lisa Martinez. She was crouched beside the crystalline wall of the structure, her hands steady despite everything they had witnessed. 2 minutes until detonation. "Copy that," Danny said. "All units fall back to the extraction point." They began moving away from the structure, keeping to the shadows, avoiding the few drones that still patrolled the perimeter. The explosives they had placed would bring the entire building down. It would destroy the collection equipment, free whatever prisoners had not yet been processed, and send a message to the aliens that nowhere on Earth was safe for them. Then Tom Bailey appeared beside Danny, his young face pale with urgency. "Sarge, there are more people inside. Another holding area that we did not know about. Thousands of them." Danny looked at his watch. 90 seconds until the charges detonated. He did not hesitate. "Martinez, disable the timer. Everyone else with me." They ran back into the alien structure, following the sounds of human voices. The holding area was vast, a chamber filled with crystalline cells that held thousands of prisoners. Danny saw children pressed against the transparent walls, elderly people lying on the floors, families clutching each other in terror. "Start opening the cells," he ordered. "Everyone who can walk, help those who cannot. We are getting out of here." His squad moved through the chamber, shooting out the crystal walls, pulling people free. The prisoners were confused, afraid, not understanding what was happening. Danny did not have time to explain. He just kept moving, kept breaking cells, kept pulling people toward the exit. "Sarge, we have incoming," Lisa shouted. "Guards coming from the east corridor." Danny turned and saw them. 3 of the crystal giants, their forms catching the light, their weapons raised. He lifted his rifle and fired, aiming for the joints in their armor, the weak points that intelligence had identified. One fell, then another. The third reached him before he could reload, its massive hand closing around his throat. Tom Bailey appeared from nowhere, driving a piece of broken crystal into the creature's eye. It screamed, a sound like breaking glass, and released Danny. Lisa finished it with a burst of fire that shattered its chest. "Move," Danny gasped, pulling himself up. "Everyone move." They ran through the corridors, a river of humanity flowing toward freedom. Behind them, Danny could hear more guards approaching, could feel the vibration of weapons fire through the walls. They burst out of the structure and kept running, putting distance between themselves and the building. The explosion came 30 seconds later, a bloom of fire and light that lit up the night sky. The collection point collapsed in on itself, burying the alien technology beneath tons of rubble. Danny stood among the survivors, watching the fire burn. His throat hurt, his hands were shaking, but he was alive, and thousands of people who should have been taken by them were alive with him. "What now, Sarge?" Tom asked. His uniform was torn and his face was bloody, but his eyes were clear. Danny looked up at the sky, where the lights of battle still flickered among the stars. "Now we find the next target. This war is not over yet." Above them, the human fleet continued its advance. Ship by ship, they were being pushed back, their harvesting operation collapsing around them. For the first time in 3,000 years, someone was fighting back against them. And for the first time in 3,000 years, they were losing. The Galactic Concord Council met in emergency session for the first time in 800 years. The Great Chamber on Station Prime was filled with representatives from all 17 member species, creatures of every shape and size and form. Some floated in tanks of liquid. Some hovered on wings of light. Some stood on dozens of legs while others had no legs at all. They had nothing in common except power and the fear that power was slipping away from them. High Arbiter called for order, its mandibles clicking together in a rapid pattern that indicated extreme distress. The situation has become worse than any of our projections anticipated. The human fleet has destroyed nearly half of the expeditionary force. They have reclaimed their planet and are now chasing the surviving enemy ships out of their solar system. Ambassador of the Imperium made a sound like grinding rocks. His species was ancient, one of the founding members of the Conquered. They had shaped the rules that governed galactic civilization for. Then we must send our own fleets. We must restore order. These humans must be taught their place. With respect, Ambassador, said the representative of the Delphi Collective, a being made of pure energy that floated within a magnetic containment sphere. Our fleets are not prepared for this kind of combat. We have enjoyed peace for so long that we have forgotten how to wage war. The humans, apparently, have not. Then we use other methods, insisted. We impose sanctions. We cut them off from galactic trade. We isolate them completely. The representative of the Merchant Guild, a small creature with too many eyes and not enough limbs, made a worried noise. That would be problematic, Ambassador. Human goods have become essential to many planetary economies. Their medical technologies alone provide treatment for 30% of the Conquered's population. If we cut off trade with humanity, many of our own citizens will suffer. Felt the weight of centuries pressing down upon its carapace. The Conquered had been built on the assumption that peace was permanent, that the rules would always be obeyed, that no species would be foolish enough to challenge the established order. Now that assumption was burning like the cities on Earth had burned. The humans have violated 17 articles of the Conquered Charter, said. They developed weapons we specifically banned. They attacked a member species without authorization. They must face consequences. Must they? The voice came from Ambassador of the Republic. She was tall and slender, her skin covered with bioluminescent patterns that shifted with her emotions. Right now, those patterns were pulsing with something that looked like anger. Perhaps we should discuss how they came to believe that harvesting humans was acceptable in the first place. The chamber grew quiet. This was dangerous territory. Everyone knew it, and no one wanted to talk about it. The religious exemption clause has always been controversial, continued, but we chose to ignore the problems because the only harvested primitive species that could not fight back, species that did not have seats in this chamber. We told ourselves that it was not our concern, that cultural practices must be respected, that we had no right to impose our values on others. Her bioluminescent patterns flared bright blue. We were cowards. We allowed atrocities because stopping them was inconvenient. You go too far, growled. I do not go far enough. Turned to face the entire council. The humans are not the problem here. They are the symptom. We built a system that permitted evil, and now we are surprised that someone has finally refused to accept it. The chamber erupted into argument. Ambassadors shouted at each other in a dozen different languages, tried to restore order, but the unity that had held the Conquered together for 3,000 years was breaking apart in front of everyone's eyes. In the middle of the chaos, no one noticed the human diplomatic ship approaching the station. Secretary General Cole stood in the small vessel's observation room, watching Station Prime grow larger as they approached. The station was enormous, a city in space, home to millions of beings from dozens of worlds. It was the heart of galactic civilization, the place where all the important decisions were made. Was about to make the most important decision in human history. Captain Jake Williams spoke from the pilot's seat. 5 minutes until we dock, Madam Secretary. Are you sure you want to do this alone? I am sure. Smoothed her uniform and checked her appearance in the reflection of the viewport. She looked tired. She looked old. She looked like someone who had watched her world burn and decided to burn something back. Whatever happens in that chamber, I want it to be clear that I speak for all of humanity, not just the politicians, not just the military, everyone. She walked through the station's corridors alone, past aliens who stared at her with curiosity or fear or hatred. She did not care what they thought of her. She only cared about what she was going to say. The council chamber fell silent when she entered. Every eye, every sensor, every form of perception in the room turned toward the small human woman walking across the floor. "Madam Secretary General," began, "you have committed acts of war against a conquered member species. You have violated the fundamental principles of galactic civilization. What do you have to say for yourself?" Walk to the center of the chamber, where a speaking platform rose from the floor. She stepped onto it and looked around at the assembled aliens, the creatures who had watched her people die and done nothing. "I have violated nothing," she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried to every corner of the room. "The conquered violated us. You watched while our people were murdered. You invoked religious exemptions and trade considerations while our children were taken from their homes. You proved that every treaty, every promise, every word this body has ever spoken is worthless the moment it becomes inconvenient for you." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small data chip. On this chip is evidence of 17 other incidents where conquered members committed atrocities under various exemption clauses, genocides, enslavements, harvests just like what they attempted on Earth, all documented, all ignored by this council. The chamber was completely silent now. "Every species in this room will receive a copy within the hour," continued. "So will every news service in the galaxy. Everyone will know what kind of organization they have been trusting with their safety. Everyone will know what the Galactic Conquered really is." "You cannot do this," said, but there was no force behind the words. "The consequences will be severe." "The consequences have already been severe." Looked directly at the High Arbiter. "Millions of my people are dead. Cities that stood for centuries are gone. Families have been destroyed. And you tell me about consequences?" She shook her head slowly. "The conquered is already dead. I am just the first one willing to say it out loud." She stepped down from the platform and walked toward the exit. At the door, she paused and turned back. "Humanity does not recognize this council's authority anymore. We do not consider ourselves bound by your charter, and we will never again pretend that this alliance represents anything other than the interests of species powerful enough to ignore it." She met eyes across the room and saw something that might have been respect. "Anyone who wants to build something better knows where to find us." Then she was gone, and the Galactic Conquered began to fall apart behind her. 6 months had passed since the battle for Earth, and the galaxy had changed beyond recognition. The Galactic Conquered had collapsed within weeks of Cole's speech. 3 member species immediately, declaring that they could no longer be part of an organization that protected murderers. 4 more followed when the evidence of past atrocities became public knowledge. News services across 1,000 worlds broadcast the stories of species that had been harvested, enslaved, or destroyed, while the council looked away. They had retreated to their home systems and sealed their borders. War crime tribunals were being organized by the surviving species, though no one knew if they would ever face justice for what they had done. Their religious leaders declared that the harvest was merely postponed, not abandoned. But their military leaders understood something their priests did not. Humanity was watching, and humanity would never forget. Admiral stood on the observation deck of the newly commissioned carrier Independence, looking out at the construction yards that orbited Earth. Ships were being built at a rate that would have been impossible 6 months ago. The fleet that had numbered 40 vessels before the invasion would number 400 by the end of the year. Humanity was not taking any chances. Not anymore. "It is quite a sight," said a voice behind him. Turned to find Ambassador approaching. The diplomat had been visiting Earth for a week, meeting with human leaders, touring the reconstruction efforts. Her bioluminescent patterns glowed with soft colors that had learned to recognize as contentment. "Ambassador, I was not expecting you until tomorrow's conference. I wanted to speak with you privately first." Joined him at the viewport, her eyes reflecting the lights of the construction yards. The Republic has completed its review of your proposed mutual defense treaty. We are prepared to sign. Raised an eyebrow. That is faster than we expected. Recent events have made many things clear that were confusing before. Patterns shifted to deeper colors. The Conquered taught us that humans were dangerous, unpredictable, unable to follow the rules of civilized society. We were told to fear you. And now I believe we should have been learning from you instead. She gestured at the ships taking shape in the construction bays. Your species has something that the rest of us lost long ago. The belief that tomorrow does not have to be the same as yesterday. The ability to look at the way things are and decide to make them different. Thought about this for a moment. We have made many mistakes throughout our history. We are not proud of everything we have done. No, but you have learned from those mistakes. Every war you fought, every tragedy you survived, you came out the other side and built something new. Turned to face him directly. The Conquered existed for 3,000 years. In all that time, it never changed, never grew, never questioned whether its rules were actually good. And when it finally faced a challenge it could not ignore, it shattered like glass. So what happens now? Now we build something better. Patterns brightened. The Republic, the Imperium, the Delphi Collective, we have all been talking. Something new is taking shape. A real alliance based on actual mutual respect instead of convenient pretenses. And humanity. Smiled. It was an expression she had learned from her time among humans. Humanity will be at the center of it. Whether you intended to or not, you have become the example. The species that refused to accept injustice. The species that showed the galaxy what courage looks like. On the surface of Earth, Danny walked through the rebuilt streets of Ayers. The alien architecture was gone, replaced by human buildings that rose toward the sky with defiant pride. The scars of the invasion were still visible, empty lots where neighborhoods had once stood, memorials on every corner for those who had died. But life was returning. Children played in parks that had been built over the rubble. Markets filled with the sounds of commerce and conversation. People were laughing again. Lisa Martinez found him at the Central Memorial, a wall of names that stretched for hundreds of meters. She stood beside him in silence, reading the names of friends and family members who would never come home. "The ceremony is starting," she finally said. "Everyone is waiting for you." Danny nodded but did not move right away. "I keep thinking about all the people we could not save, all the ones who were taken before we could reach them." "I know," Lisa put her hand on his shoulder, "but we saved many more, and we made sure it will never happen again." They walked together to the ceremony where Secretary General Cole was addressing a crowd of survivors. Tom Bailey was there, wearing the uniform of a corporal now, the promotions coming fast in a military that was growing every day. Commander Wright stood in the front row, her medals catching the sunlight. She had been offered a desk job after the war, a comfortable position where she could rest and heal. She had refused. There was still work to be done. His voice carried across the crowd, amplified by speakers that had been set up throughout the plaza. "Today we honor those who gave everything, not just in the battle for Earth, but in the battles that came after. The battles that are still being fought across the galaxy, wherever there are people who need protecting and tyrants who need to be stopped." Danny looked around at the faces in the crowd. Survivors, fighters, people who had looked death in the face and chosen to fight back. They had been ordinary citizens before the invasion, teachers and shopkeepers and students and workers. Now they were something else. They were the people who had saved humanity. "Some will say we were lucky," continued, "that we won because the enemy underestimated us, or because we had secret weapons, or because the Conquered was already weak. But I believe the truth is simpler than that. We won because we chose to." She paused, letting her words settle over the crowd like a blessing. Every species in the galaxy was taught to accept their place in the order of things, to follow the rules even when the rules were unjust, to survive by not making waves. But humanity has never been very good at following rules that we did not help create. And when we saw what those rules really meant, when we understood that they were designed to protect the powerful and abandon the weak, we tore them down. Danny felt Lisa's hand slip into his. Around them, the crowd was silent, listening to every word. So today, as we remember those we lost, let us also celebrate what we have gained. Not just our freedom, but our future. A future where no species, including ours, will ever again be harvested or enslaved or forgotten because someone decided they were not important enough to protect. The applause started slowly, then built until it thundered off the walls of the new buildings. It echoed through streets that had been silent with death just months ago. It carried across the city and up into the sky, where ships were preparing to carry humanity to the stars. Danny looked up at that sky, at the endless darkness that had once seemed so threatening. It did not seem threatening anymore. It seemed like a promise, a canvas waiting to be filled with new stories, new adventures, new possibilities. Humanity had taken its place among the stars, not as servants or subordinates, not as rule followers begging for approval. They had taken their place as equals, as warriors, as builders of a new order. And this time it was on their own terms. The ceremony ended, and the crowd began to disperse, returning to the work of rebuilding their world and their future. Danny stayed a moment longer, looking at the names on the memorial wall. "We did it," he whispered to the dead. "We made them pay, and we will never let anyone forget what you sacrificed." Then he turned and walked into the sunlight, ready for whatever came next. The galaxy had changed forever, and humanity was just getting started.